Today, I'm supposed to talk about specific aims. Um, and I can't emphasize enough how important the specific aims page is in a grant. Um, I have been on countless review panels. I've chaired them. I have just been on that. And to a person on the panels that I have been on, the one thing that I know that people will read, even if they're not assigned that grant, is the specific aims page. And because they're going to be voting on everything, they listen to this discussion. They may not read all of your grant if they're not assigned it, but they will read the specific aims page. And they will form their opinion of your entire work based on that one page. And they're not, if they have questions or whatever, they're not going to go look it up. They're going to look at the specific aims page. So it is vitally important that you do that right. And so I come about working on specific aims different than most people. Um, and it's worked pretty good for me. I've been at the University of Alabama for 21 plus years, and I've been funded that entire time. I came with money, and there's not been a time at the university, and I'm currently funded externally from the university for the university. And so, does that mean I've gotten everything I've applied for? No, by no means. I've been turned down far more than I've been, awarded anything. But I have been successful. And it really has to do, I think, with marketing your application and making sure that you do the best you can. And it starts with the specific aims page. And so today I've gathered some stuff from some places that I really admire. And I want to share with you the anatomy of a specific aims page. So am I allowed to share my screen?
Yes.
There. All right. Can you see that? Is that legible? Do I need to increase it maybe a little bit?
Looks good to me. Thank you.
There we go. All right. So let's get started with that. So the specific aims section is the most vital part of any grant application to me. These are the opinions of John Higginbotham, and you can take them or leave them. They're not the University of Alabama's opinions, they're just mine. And, take it if it's helpful. If it's not, just throw it away. But here in the specific aims page, you really put yourself out there and people make an opinion of you from the specific aims page. And they're going to decide from that one page whether they trust you and whether they have confidence that you can do what you say you're going to do. And you have to convince them that it's important to fund you. Now, they're not allowed to use that F word, funding, in the review panel, but they are going to decide if they're going to be a cheerleader for you or they're going to be in opposition of you. And so you have to do that in that first one page. But you also have to convey to them that you are the ones that more than anybody that is going to be looked at there are able to do the things that you say you're going to do in that research. That y'all are the ones ideally suited to do that. Not just, oh, we could do that or we're one of them, but you have to convince them that you are the only one that really can do what you say you're going to do and do it well and do it completely. Now, what you have to understand is that all this has to be done in one page very concisely. And you will hear me several times today say, I believe there are no good writers. There are only good rewriters. And you need to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. And I think you need to spend more time rewriting this page than you do the entire rest of your grant, because it is that important. So there it is. No good writers, only good rewriters. It's central to your whole proposal. I think it should be the first thing that you write. Do not think of it as an abbreviated version of your grant. I know so many people that will go and they'll write the grant and then they'll come back and write the specific aims page and just take bits from here and bits from there and just throw something together. I think this needs to be the most thoughtful, thought through piece of your entire work. And I think if you write this well and it's well thought out, the remainder of the grant application is really a whole lot easier to write. You can do everything because it's already started for you there, and you just expand upon it. And that's the way I look at the specific aims. It has to fit on one page, NIH grants specifically, but a lot of foundations and other places follow the format of NIH. So the specific aims page really, if you can do it for NIH, you can do it just for about anybody. But it should have 4 paragraphs in my thoughts. It has to have an introductory paragraph. It has to have what I call a solution paragraph. Then you have to have the aims, and then you have to have a summary paragraph. And we're going to go through all of those today. Now, I do feel, as Charlene said, that we're very informal, so please feel free to ask a question or to make a statement anytime that you want. So the introductory paragraph, here you're going to introduce your research subjects and quickly capture their attention. It has to be something that makes them go say, oh yeah, this is cool, or I never thought about that before. You need to describe the significant gap in knowledge, that's going on, and it directly relates to a critical need that they deal with, right? A lot of people just write things because they think it's a good idea. That doesn't work anymore. It has to be marketed, and you have to understand who your audience is. If you need to know who the funding agency is, you need to know what their strategic plan is and what their mission is and what the goals of that organization are. And you need to help them meet those goals. And so if your research doesn't do that, then you're off the mark. You need to understand it, and it's vitally important that you help them do those sorts of things. And particularly when the funding opportunity announcement comes out, that you follow that, and they'll have in there that this is part of what we're trying to do, and you need to be able to say, I'm helping you do that. So you need to know their mission statement. You need to ensure that the critical need that you are trying to fill fits well within that mission. I've seen a lot of people put stuff in and they just say, that really just is not where we are. That doesn't fit with what we're trying to do. And they don't even get scored with things that are going on there. So the introductory paragraph, I think, has the following information in it. It needs the first, and it needs that hook, that thing that briefly describes what your proposal's about, and it should convey a sense of importance, urgency for your research, and you need to explain the what it is and why it is critical that you conduct the research. Why do you need this? What's it going to do? What's it going to change? Who's going to benefit for it? You may even want to throw in things like Healthy People, 2020, and some of the goals and objectives that come out of that document as well. You need to state what's known. You know, what does the sentence or what does the literature say about that specific field? Um, you know, you need to ground them in the subject matter. Now, you have to understand that in the review panel, not everybody's going to be an expert in your area. Maybe even the person that's primary reviewer isn't related to your research. But you need to be able to write in such a manner that everybody on that panel understands what you're trying to get across. And you need to have for the readers that those details that you understand why you're proposing that work. You have a rigorous understanding of the literature, but you need to be concise and only bring in key points of the things that are going. Because remember, you only have one page. You need to show that there's a gap in the knowledge. You know, that what you're trying to do will fill that gap, so you got to tell them what the gap is, what's not known, and why it needs to be addressed. And you need to say, you know, that your research will fill that gap using the funding that these people, you know, will be able to provide and that you're requesting. And it needs to be a critical need. It needs to be hypothesis driven. It needs to be a new technique, a new compound, a new treatment that you're proposing. And the need really is to increase the relevant knowledge in there and why that's important, and why you should be funded. And you need to emphasize the significance of your problem that you're trying to address, and that the things you're doing are really the next logical step, that there's reasoning behind what you're doing. A lot of times in my advanced epi class, we design epidemiologic projects, and they say, well, which study design do I choose? And I say, I don't care. You just have to justify it. And you have to be able to say why you're doing what you're doing and how it fits with what's there. So those are the things that need to be in that introductory paragraph. I was able to get this particular specific aims first introductory paragraph, and I've color-coded it. Sorry, I am color deficit, so I don't even know what colors I picked, but I think they look different to me, so I hope they are. And so that first one up here at the top is the hook. You know, viruses are thought to be involved in 15 to 20% of human cancers worldwide, thus providing critical tools to reveal common mechanisms involved in human malignancy. That's the thing. We got to save the world, right? So that's the hook. You've got to put something out there, and it's got to start, and it's got to grab their attention from the very beginning. And then we moved into what's known, you know, what we get from the literature, and then we need to find that gap. And although this particular oncoprotein has been shown to transform cells in culture and to introduce tumors in a variety of transgenic mouse models, the mechanism by which this transformed cells is not well understood. That's the gap. It doesn't have to be, well, there's not this and this and this. It just needs to be clear what is and what is not. And they did that in one sentence. And so we need to understand and be able to convey. You know, Wordsworth said, I'm sorry I wrote this letter so long, I didn't have time to write a short one. So, you know, make sure you spend the time rewriting and rewriting so that you can get things down and very clear. And ask people to review specific paragraphs. Have your friends, have, you know, the Alabama Life Research Institute, have Lana Nations and her group review paragraphs for you so that you can understand, colleagues, all that sort of stuff. The more eyes that are on it, the better. And say, I'm trying to say this. Do I do that? Give them a task associated with reviewing that. I don't like giving people my whole grant and say, will you review this for me and tell me what's wrong? Because that takes an awful lot of time. But if I ask several different people, will you look at my specific aims page, particularly the introductory paragraph? I get much more feedback, it's much clearer, and they spend more attentive time to it than they do reading the entire thing. And so that's why I think you should have people read and read and read. And then the critical need. Currently, a major obstacle in the field is that doing this cannot be compared, and we can make it do this particular thing. And so that helps move that through. So the solution paragraph. In this paragraph, you want to tell them what you're specifically going to do that fills that gap in the knowledge. And you need to convince your reviewers that you have a solution to address that gap and the expertise to accomplish this. Keep your wording simple, relevant, and to the point. But you want to make sure, what do you want to do? Why are you doing it? And how do you want to do it? And so, therefore, that's what needs to go into this solution paragraph. And again, the sections that go within this are the long-term goal, the hypothesis or research questions and proposal objectives, the rationale, and qualification. Now, some people want to go into all these specific qualifications, and I've got a PhD in this. You don't need that. What you need to do is briefly state why your design and your team are the best to do this goal. You can mention preliminary data. You can mention qualifications. We've done this type of work, or we've done the preparations for this type of work. We've got the equipment that nobody else has, or that very few people have to do this, but be concise with all that you're doing. Here's another piece that I took from that same mouse sort of stuff. And again, the long-term goal here, to solve this problem, we will develop an innovative mouse model system in which to study tax tumorigenesis. It doesn't have to be long, but this is something that says this is going to be a long-term thing. We want to do this so it not only works here, but it helps us in the future as well. It's going to be something that goes on and on and on. Qualifications. Using a technique we previously employed. We're going to do this, we're going to fix this, but we've done this before. That's all you need. You don't need to say, well, I did this undergraduate work, I did this postdoctoral work, and I learned how to do this last Thursday. No, you just need to say, we've done this before, we're ready to move. This is the next place that this research is going, and we're the ones to do it. And then you end with the payoff. In our improved model system, insertion of this locus will eliminate random integration sites and blah, blah, blah. So what is going to come out of all this? The benefit of the things that are coming to pass. And then the aims, right? You briefly describe each aims that you will use to test your hypothesis. Ideally, they should be related, but there's some people that say that they don't necessarily need to be dependent on each other, because if you have 5 aims and you miss your first one, then they're going to say, well, if they don't have a plan to deal with these issues, if they don't meet their first step, how can they do the rest of them? So your score gets worse. So if you can separate them a little bit and make them not dependent on each other, then they say, oh yeah, but you still need to address in the grant your barriers and the things that you can do if there are potential problems. But here you need to kind of separate that out. You need about 2 or 4 sentences for each one, and you should describe the experimental approach, and how each aim is going to help you answer your larger hypothesis or reach your larger goal, or answer your larger research question. So you should describe the approach, as we just said. And typically in NIH R01, the very large research grants, you have 2 to 4 aims. And so you want to do them separately in a separate little paragraph. And you want to give it these sort of sections, give your aim a title that really clearly states the objective in relationship to the hypothesis. Give a summary of your experiment. Don't go through the entire method section and just put it here. Just be very concise, but enough to let them know that you know what you're doing. And so that these reviewers can clearly read and understand each aim. So use headings or bullets to delineate each specific aim. Break it up, put some white space in there. Because if you jam everything together, they're going to get tired and they're not going to remember what they read. And if you make it easier for them, they make it easier for you. So here in aim 1, we want to identify the mechanism responsible for macrophage activation. The working hypothesis for this aim is, and you go through and state that. And it's based upon preliminary data that we have done. So you put back in there that you have this expertise to do that sort of stuff, and can move on. And if you can cite a figure later on that helps do that, that's great. Don't waste your space with the figure in your aims. Put it somewhere else. But if it helps explain it, make sure you include that in your application. So here is something that I found from a friend of mine that gave a similar talk, and they have a specific aims checklist. And I'll provide these slides to Lena, and she can share them with you if you would like them. Are any of your aims descriptive? Do they do any look and see research, an unfocused fishing expedition? Don't need to do that. You need to rewrite them. Are your aims directly linked to parts of your central hypothesis? You want to make sure that that happens. Are any of your aims superfluous or testing a part of your central, superfluous to testing a part of your central hypothesis? Well, if they are, then they really don't need to be there. I think of those as while you're here questions. How many of you have ever been on answering a questionnaire and it's not related to the research at hand? It's just thrown in there because somebody wanted to know, and we may analyze that data sometime. I call those while you're here questions. And we don't need while you're here aims either. It needs to be very specific, related to your hypothesis, and answering and moving the science forward. Therefore, relating to that hypothesis as we see in number 4. And does your ability to pursue later aims depend in any critical way upon the expected outcome of an earlier one? We just talked about that a little bit. If it does, then you're dead in the water if you can't get past the first one. And the reviewers will know that. They will be able to see that and say, why should we fund it when they're putting all their money on this? And if it's not, rock solid, it gets even worse. So think about those sorts of things. The final summary paragraph is often overlooked. Some people just end with the last aim. And I think that really does a disservice to you and to the research. But I think it's really vital to selling and marketing your research to this particular group. Think of it as an hourglass. I really like this example, where the wide parts represent the general information and global significance, and the narrow parts are the fine details. If you end with the aim section, and as we've just talked about, and on a narrow scope, then it's going to tip over. So the hourglass gives you a stable base and it won't topple over. And the final paragraph creates a firm, broad base to support your entire proposal. So it needs to talk about the innovation in this last paragraph. I can't tell you how many times people have brought up and read out of somebody's application in their reviewing it that they say, this is innovative. It says so right there. That's the whole statement. It says that this research is innovative. Or they say this research is innovative because, you know, and people just laugh. But what really works is, as a result of this work and filling the aforementioned gap in the literature, this work will go beyond the current paradigm. That says it's innovative without using those words. And to me, someone says, yeah, when they tell you it's innovative, they're just being arrogant. And that really turns a lot of reviewers off. You need to talk about your expected outcomes for the project. What do you expect to see upon the completion of the aims? And include this only if you've not had it in the aims. And then the impact. State how this is going to save the world. You started out saying the world needed to be saved. Well, tell us now how you're going to do that in the broad impact statement about how it will benefit people and other subjects that you're looking at, and will be the grounds for future research. You know, will be the place that this is the key component for moving this forward from here on out, and we will be able to take this on and on into the future. So some final thoughts. Your specific aims may vary from this, but it represents a really good template to think about. But it's not all inclusive. Each specific aims page is unique to that particular proposal, so there's a lot of flexibility in how you deal with these elements, how they're arranged, and how they're emphasized. Consider, you know, your innovation, your significant elements as you decide on how to organize that page. It needs to have all those elements, though, I think, in order to be able to do present and sell your particular idea. I think you should ask colleagues to review drafts. I think you should talk with program officers, and if they ever ask, can I see your specific aims page, please have it there right then to be able to send it to them. I've had people that I've been with and even in my set with myself, talking to project officers, and they said, let me rewrite this for you. And that just really was a game changer, and really helped improve what we were doing. And we were successful when we did what they said to do. So we really appreciate and want to listen to that. Ask people with review panel experience to review your specific aims page. Let them see and do what they've done, even if they're not in your specific area, even if they don't know. They've looked at these things before and they know what to think about. But again, please remember, I don't think there are any good writers. There are only good rewriters. And so you need to rewrite and rewrite and rewrite. But keep on schedule. Don't let it get you behind. Make sure that you have a timeline for getting your proposal done and letting people have time to review it before you send it in. I know that was kind of quick and kind of speedy, but I'd be glad to answer any questions, or if you have anything that you'd like to add, please feel free.
So I just want to thank you again for coming and talking to the group. So we did meet yesterday to begin, and we talked about a few things. One are the different R mechanisms, but another is, so I've seen a trend lately in specific aims where people are putting figures to describe the mechanism, like in some ways, like the overall sort of goals of the project. What are your thoughts on adding those types of descriptive figures to aims?
You know, I think you have to have a very specific reason for putting something in. If a figure will explain more than the words that would have occupied that space, then you should consider it. But what are you going to do when it comes up later in the grant? Are you going to redo the graphic there as well and have it in two places? I don't think that's the thing to do. I really think that you have to have a super heavy duty reason of putting that in the aims rather than having it in the body of the proposal. But that's John Higginbotham's opinion, and you don't have to take my advice.
So are there any other questions from the group about the aims? Because I'm going to ask him a couple questions about his opinions of the different R's, but
I have a question that I hope is related. I've seen a lot more PCORI grants being put out there, and it appears to me that this is really focused on NIH grants and NIH type grants, but that it could be applicable across a lot of the different kind of federal entities. Is this pattern something that you use specifically for NIH, or do you use it kind of across the different types of applications that you submit?
I use, the template to think about this across every different application that I use. I've been funded by 39 different organizations, and it's something like this or very similar to this for each one of those that I've ever done.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I was hoping to ask a question. I think a lot of what you talked about, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is maybe in the thought process of being, an R01, something like that. I'm curious for someone who's maybe going for like an R21 or something that's, this is brand new. This is something that's, we don't necessarily have all of the previous data for. Do you have any other, would you change anything about this in terms of how you'd approach something like an R21?
So an R21 is about something that's, brand new and trying to make a really big step out into a new direction, a proof of concept sort of thing. So you have to be able to provide that information that you're doing that in the abstract. So I think it's still in there. And while preliminary data is not required on a lot of those things, having it does not hurt. And being able to say, I stepped out here before, and now I'm stepping out beyond that to try to do something new.
Yeah, she's actually brought up something we discussed yesterday in terms of the different R mechanisms. So like an R03 is the small grant, and you don't need pilot data for the R03. The R21, technically you don't need pilot data, but reviewers don't seem to understand that. so they still look for pilot data, even though the instructions say that they don't need pilot data.
And they say that in the review panel, that it's not required. But people say there is no pilot data here, or
yep.
They say there is no proof that they have done anything before that gives us the information that they can do this.
Right. So, yeah, R21s have become trickier, I think, than they used to be, because I think probably it's become more competitive than they.
The other thing to think about is the number of specific aims. If they're looking at 3 to 4 specific aims in a huge R01, you don't need to put 5 specific aims in an R03, right? Because they're just going to think that you don't understand what you're doing, you're trying to do too much. for this amount of money, and you really have no concept of what it really takes to do all that. So please be aware that the number of aims you have really needs to be dictated first by the gaps in the literature, but then by the amount of funding and the type of mechanism that you're looking at.
Right. Because R03s and R21s are 2 years. So to propose 5 aims to do in 2 years, no one's going to take you seriously.
And I've seen that more times than I can count.
Any other questions? Okay, so then I think some insights, and one of the questions that came up yesterday is the R15, and where Alabama is in being qualified and remaining qualified for the R15.
So right now, the University of Alabama is still eligible for R15 mechanisms. So we can still apply for those things.
Yes, I'll ask a question. Please forgive my Georgia Bulldogs sweatshirt. I know it's controversial. Here. Really looking forward to it.
At least it's not Auburn.
Yeah. And I grew up learning that, so at least that's in common. I was wondering, and you kind of mentioned this, John, a little bit, but could you just talk a little bit more about kind of the sweet spot on number of aims with the mechanism? Because some examples that I've seen that have been this great project that got funded, like they did have a lot. So then when I'm writing my aims and I only have 3, I feel like I'm not like as brilliant or something. So, but you kind of got at that maybe sometimes more aims is bad because it looks like you're not like more disciplined and like precise about what you're trying to research.
Right. And there are so many different ways people put their aims together that, you know, it's really difficult sometimes to say, well, you have to do this. I've seen somebody with 8 aims, but each of those aims was a tiny little thing, right, that could be done in 2 days. All right. And so it really could have been lumped in 3 specific aims that they did this, and this for that aim. But instead of doing that, they went this little bit, and this little, all the way through that, right? But it would, to me, it would have read better and been more hypothesis driven if they had put all those together into categories of aims rather than all those specific little steps, right? So you really need to look and see when they, not just, oh, they've got 8 aims, but look what they're doing and try to see, yeah, that could be it. But I think that you know, every time I've talked with project officers and people, the more aims that you write, the better you better be at writing them and convincing people that you can do that. Because when they look at it and see they say, they're going to do that in 2 years, you know, and then they just may rush through it and not really understand it. But if you do it concisely and precisely into a 3, and mine is the rule of 3. I just love 3 sort of things with that and do that sort of stuff. But it's all about your ability to write and be able to convey that message. That you can do that with how many ever aims you do. But it usually works out to be 3 to 4.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it has a lot to do with what you're proposing to do in those aims, right? So if it takes, 12 months to do one part of an aim, and the people will know it's going to take that long to do, you're collecting a whole bunch of data, running a lot of subjects, and you're going to have separate subjects for each of them. So it's really about the amount of work you're proposing to do and whether it's feasible to do in the time frame of the grant and with the budget of the grant more than anything else. Because that's part of the evaluation. Okay, so for those of you who are here for the first time today and weren't here yesterday, one of the things that I want from you guys is for you to email me your topics, like what you're planning to write and when you're planning to submit. So the goal of this is to have a series of these. We're talking about specific aims now. And hopefully you're in the process of putting together a proposal for February or June. And we'll have other workshops on other pieces of the grant, but I also want to try to see if I can pair you with someone who can go over your aims and give you feedback on your aims that are close to your discipline. So that's why it'd be great if you guys just send me some information about what your topic is, if you've identified a program, an NIH Institute and program officer, just to give us more information so we can sort of help guide you through this process. So please do that as soon as possible.
Also, I sent some aims out yesterday, just so that you guys could look at some examples as you're writing. If anybody did not receive those, just shoot me an email and let me know, and I'll be sure that you get some examples. And if there's something specific that you're looking for, let me know and I'll try and get you something that's kind of close to what it is that you're doing.
Okay. All right, so we'll be meeting again tomorrow. And thanks again, John.
Thanks,
everyone.
John. We'll see you Monday for how to speak to a program officer.
Thank you, John.
Bye.
Bye.